All right, here we go. It is that time of the week again for the Global Bob Show. The Global Bob Show, we are the crossroad of technology and politics. This week we got a real special topic in store for you all. I'm pretty excited about this particular podcast. This one is titled Starlink, the ultimate weapon in fighting oppressive regimes. Now, I know that's a lot to take in, but we're going to unpack it and explain just how effective Starlink is in modern war and also for the free flow of information. I'd like to thank everybody that tunes into the show each week. I do this show for you all, and without the support of my listeners, then why would I even do this? But you can reach out to me at Global Bob Show on Twitter, or you can reach me on my Gmail account, globalbobshow@gmail.com. And we also have a Facebook page, Global Bob Show. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody. The stats, I look at them each week, and the show is growing. We're even getting some international listeners, which is really cool. And I just want to thank everybody again. Like I said, this is episode number 12. And if you listen to the podcast from the first episode all the way through this one, that's almost 6 hours of Global Bob. All right, let's get into this. So what is Starlink? Well, Starlink is a company that is part of SpaceX. And we all know the owner of SpaceX, Elon Musk, a very brilliant man who has brought us the Tesla car. He's also brought us rocket ships that's got the U.S. back into the space game. He's got very ambitious plans. It's going to take us to the moon and Mars. And this is his answer to the internet. Now, Starlink has about 2,200 satellites up in space. And they're planning on this Gen 1 to be about 4,408 satellites. But when this is all said and done, they're talking about having 42,000 satellites up in space. Now, that's just absolutely amazing. All these satellites that are up there now, this version 1 satellites, they weigh about 575 pounds. And they're roughly the size of your coffee table. Now, these things are whizzing around the Earth, and what the basic way that they work is that they have ground stations all over the world. And as these satellites whiz by your house or your location where you have the ground terminal at, then your ground terminal or antenna outside, it sends a signal up to the satellite, and the satellite repeats that signal, and it comes down to one of the ground stations. Now, where I'm at here in Florida, there's a couple ground stations. I think there's like 4 or 5 here in Florida for our area. But these satellites, they whiz by, and they're doing about 17,000 miles an hour, which that's pretty dang fast. So what I want you to understand is these satellites that you're connected to, this isn't like your DirecTV or even some of y'all that have Viasat. These satellites are always whizzing by. And so at any time, looking at my Starlink terminal, it's tracking about 4 to 5 satellites. So it uses one as a primary, and when that one whizzes by, and it automatically go to the next one. And also, it'll go from different ground stations. So basically, this is what they call bent pipe technology. And bent pipe technology with satellites means that the satellite has to see the antenna and the satellite has to see the ground station. And so these satellites, like I said, they're doing 17,000 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. And it takes about 90 minutes for them to circle the Earth. So that one satellite that's over your house that's providing you with internet, within 90 minutes, it could go all the way around the Earth and provide all kinds of people with internet, which is really cool. So the little antenna on the ground, I don't know if you guys have seen these or not, but they're very small, and this is going to come out later in the podcast here. They're very small. They're only about, 19 inches by 12 inches, and they weigh about 9 pounds. And they have a router that's built into them. And when you get the package, I'm quite confident that just about anybody could install one of these things. I mean, they are pretty much plug and play, so they're very easy to set up. It even comes with a little wireless router, and you can't do anything wrong because there's only 2 little ports on the bottom. One's a power port and one hooks to the antenna. So to summarize it, these things are cheap, easy to install, very fast internet-wise. I've seen mine go up as high as 400 or 500 megabits per second whenever I was doing a speed test, and so that's pretty good quality. Now, there are other satellite systems. Now, Elon is always on the forefront of technology, and but there have been satellite systems throughout the years, and probably some of my listeners that are in rural areas are pretty familiar with these. These are the ones by Viasat and HughesNet, and they're harder to set up. Most of these, they won't let you set them up yourself. When my Starlink package arrived, it came via FedEx, and about 10 minutes later, it was really nothing to do. Just kind of put it out in the yard and plug it in. Now, you got to fish your wires around, but these other ones like Viasat and HughesNet, they're pretty complicated to set up. Maybe complicated is not the right word, but they can be very finicky, and they have to be set up by a professional installer. Now, in my course of work, I was certified for Viasat, so I know just how much it takes to get these things on the right bird, as we call it in the industry, or the right satellite. And then you have to have some, very, very fine adjustments. So it's not like the Starlink where you can just set it out in the yard and it'll connect up. Now, you can get with HughesNet and Viasat these portable packages. I had one on my bus at one time. Very expensive, like $8,000 to $10,000 for it. And it has to be put on by a professional installer. And basically, when I went somewhere, I could park and push the button, and it would automatically find the satellite. But like I said, very expensive. I think Starlink all in's about $700. Now, the monthly fee on it is, some people say it's expensive. I don't think it's that bad. It's about $110, I think, a month. And if you wanted the portable package where you could take it anywhere that you can get Starlink, I think it's extra $25. So I think all in, if you have what they call their portable package, or RV package is what they call it, it comes out to be about $135 a month. So Viasat and Hughes, they're pretty expensive. I think they're a little more expensive than this, but that's what we've had for most of the years. And we know that when the thunderstorms come and heavy fog, the Viasat and the HughesNet cut out. Now, Starlink, one of the reasons why to me, I think that it does a lot better in the Florida weather here is because the satellites are so much closer to the Earth. With the Starlink satellite, you're looking at about, I think they're about 275, maybe 300 miles. But don't get too fixated on how close they are. Just know they're very close to the Earth, where these other ones are about 22,000 miles out in space. And so it takes a lot to go from your house. With Viasat and Hughes, you're going 22,000 miles up in space. It's turning around and coming down back to its ground station. So that's another 22,000. So that's a 44,000 mile round trip that signal had to make. And with the Starlink, I mean, it's only going maybe, say 350 miles up, 350. That's only 700 mile. That's not very far at all. So that's why I think it can punch through the clouds. Now, Elon's not the only one that has this idea of these mega constellations. There's another one out there, and I think they're bankrupt. It's called OneWeb, which they had ideas too for mega constellation. And then you got Bezos with his Amazon Project Kepler. Now, neither one of these, I think, have went into production yet where you can actually sign up for it as you can with Starlink. So I want to start you off with a quote here that kind of resonates. Whoever controls the media controls the mind. Now, that's pretty powerful, and we're seeing that play out now in Russia and the Ukraine. And when the Russians went into the Ukraine, first thing that they attempted to do was to control the internet in the Ukraine and either shut it down or reroute the internet through Russia so they could monitor it and use that as intel. So when countries do this, they do it for two reasons. One, they want to make sure that their narrative is the one that plays out in front of people. So they could do things like block Western sites, of which Russia started doing in their own country. Therefore, when they tell the citizens how they're winning the war and give them information, that their only source of that information is from the Russian government. And when they try to control the internet inside of the Ukraine, it's the same thing. They could have the websites that the Ukrainians could go to. Let's say the Ukrainians try to go to www.cnn.com or foxnews.com. Now, the Russians could intercept that and reroute it to their website. Therefore, they could get, pictures in front of the Ukrainians. Of course, they'll know that it's not the real Fox News or the real CNN, but they do that to put pictures in front of them and media in front of them to talk about how they're winning the war and how they should lay down arms. So in the intel community, we would call this psyops, or psychological warfare. Now, the Ukrainians would know that this is going on, obviously, and the Russian people inside of the Russian Federation would also know, because they're smart people, that they're receiving a bunch of propaganda. And there are other ways besides the internet to get information in and out of the country. But the thing is that with shortwave radio, they could tune in and listen to the Voice of America, which is broadcast all around the world. Also, the BBC is broadcast. But those radio stations that come in on those frequencies, it's pretty simple to block. There's very mature ways of blocking radio waves that come in. There's also, through telephone lines, they could take and try to call people and get the news. And this also became pretty popular at one time, are phone numbers that you could dial, and they were hooked to the news audio. So off of your phone, you could dial and listen to the news. Those have kind of went by the wayside, but there are still some underground ones today. However, the Russians could figure out those phone numbers, and because they control the telecommunications inside of both countries, they could inadvertently shut that down. So the traditional ways of getting information in and out of countries, it's pretty simple to block and or shut down. But now here comes this guy from South Africa, and his name is Elon Musk. And he's like, wait a second, I have these Starlink terminals. They're blocking the traditional fiber optic lines or rerouting them and stuff. Why don't I just send a bunch of Starlink terminals to the Ukraine? And that's exactly what he did. And this actually made the Russians pretty upset, and they tried to do what they call electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, of which Starlink, here's a private company, was able to combat against that, which I thought was amazing. Now, why can the Ukraine use Starlink and the ground terminals not be in the Ukraine? Well, when these Starlink satellites come over, there's a footprint that they have. And the footprint is about a 300-mile diameter. And so with that 300-mile diameter, that means some countries, like they could have a down station or downlink inside of Poland. And even though the Starlink is inside of the Ukraine, then the ground station is in a safe area. Now, with version 1, this is very much the way these work with that bent pipe technology. And so when you think about the countries that restrict satellite communications, like India, China, Russia, Burma/Myanmar, and Cuba, these Starlink terminals pose a really big threat to them because someone inside the country could have one of these terminals. Remember, I said they're only about 19 inches by 12 inches, so very small. They can be hidden very easily. And say our brothers and sisters in Cuba, if we could get these in the hands of the Cuban people, then there's a Starlink downlink in Miami. And so they could very easily, with no problem, get internet in and out of Cuba. And the dictators don't like this because these terminals are easy to identify, which does have me worried because you can use frequency finding technology, which in ham radio, we've done this. And if any of you all are pilots out there, you do this all the time when you're using VORs. So the terminals, while they're easy to find, they're very hard to block. Now, whenever I say they block radio waves like they do with shortwave, that's because there's one frequency that's out there, or a couple frequencies. These satellites use many, many frequencies, and there's a lot of other things that are inside those frequency bands. And so it's not like you just tune in to one particular frequency and that's where it's at. So the government that's wishing to block Starlink, they would have to basically find all the frequencies and jam them all at the same time. But, that's just really not feasible. So probably the way that they'll go about combating these are trying to identify them and then going and arresting the people that are running these. Now, the reason why this would work good in Cuba and some of the smaller countries is because of that footprint of version 1 satellites. Version 2 satellites, and I'm probably messing this up, it could be version 1.5, but basically the next generation of Starlink is going to be a lot bigger bird, as we call satellites, up in the sky. It's going to be a lot bigger, and it's going to have capabilities called interstellar switching. Now, that's a pretty cool name. I've always liked saying that, interstellar switching. And interstellar switching is basically a way for one satellite to beam to another satellite before it goes down to a ground station. Remember the bent pipe technology? It basically goes up, repeats, and comes down. Has about a 300-mile diameter footprint. But with interstellar switching, now the folks that are in Russia and China, they don't necessarily just have to be on the fringe of the country to get this service. Now they could be anywhere in the country, because if they can have a bird fly over and they can get the signal up to the bird, that bird will automatically redistribute that traffic until it finds an appropriate ground station. So there's some in Australia, there's some in New Zealand, so I could very easily see where there could be, through interstellar switching, people or users in these countries that are connecting to the bird above, and then it go thousands and thousands of miles away till it hits a ground station. Now that's some pretty neat stuff. And it really tips these oppressive regimes on their head, because they've always thought, just like in China, well, we'll control the internet through the Great Firewall of China. We will block VPN technology. We will block voice over IP like Skype. And so they do everything they can so any of the information coming in and out of the countries, they control. Now, when you think about this, this isn't being done by the U.S. government. This is being done by a private person with a corporation. And so with that, there's this expectation of these private corporations. Of course, they got to have the permission of their host government, but they can put these satellites up and say, hey, we can't control where they go. They're orbiting around Earth, and if someone uses it, they can use it. Now, in the past, I've talked about some of the satellite technology that I use for communications, and I think it was all the way back in podcast number 1, but I use Inmarsat and I use Iridium. Now, my Iridium and Inmarsat may not work in some of these countries that I've talked about before, Russia, China, India, but it's not because it technically cannot work there. It's because Inmarsat and Iridium are wanting the countries to use their products, so they cut a deal with that country and say, okay, we will provide you service, Russia, with our Iridium phones, but we will block anybody that tries to use an Iridium phone from using it. So the Iridium phone, just like the Starlink, it has a GPS in it. And so they do that so the government will allow them to have some kind of coverage in there. But Starlink and Elon, as aggressive as he is, I doubt that he would do that. I think that he believes in the free flow of information enough, and he understands that we got to get the people the information that's not propaganda. So yes, Elon would have the means to restrict the Starlink terminals wherever he wants, because there are GPSs in these terminals. But I don't think he will, and then that's why really the regimes are kind of upset with him. I mean, he's tweeted out before that he knows that especially Russia is, because now he can get the citizens to have unfiltered, unbiased connectivity into those countries. And what a game changer that is. I mean, we see in wars before the Russian-Ukrainian war, that's the first thing you do. When we went into Iraq, then U.S. fighters were bombing cell towers and they were taking out communications. But now, how do you do that when a satellite is 350 miles overhead? The terminals can be installed by anybody that's plug and play. And once that satellite signal is up, off, and into space, then it's very hard to jam. Well, I can tell you, this has gotten the Chinese so worried that they have actually put out a paper a few days ago, and it talks about how they need to find a way to combat Starlink. Now, I think that's amazing. You know, before we've always seen kind of behind the scenes, this company is manufacturing something for the government, and so we got to figure out how to hack into there. But this is the first time that I really feel like where a government has set publicly their sights on a private corporation or commercial corporation, non-government corporation. And in the paper, they published it. Now, I did get a translated copy before it was pulled down off the Chinese website, but it says they got to have both hard and soft means to combat Starlink. And in the industry, when they say hard means, that means how can they physically disrupt these satellites? And China has lasers. China has other ways that they have demonstrated that they can blow up a satellite. But here's the thing. Elon, when he has his full constellation out there, there could be upwards of 42,000 of these satellites up in space. So this isn't like they're going after one or two satellites. I could see that where, okay, we could go up there and take one out. But I mean, when you got 42,000 of them, that's quite a bit. They would almost need a Starlink SpaceX vacuum cleaner to suck all these things out of the sky. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have some kind of advanced capability. I just think that it would be very hard for them to do that. Now, when they talk about a soft means, what they're talking about there is that they would need to figure out how to hack into them and to disable them. And that is a very real threat. We know that China and Russia have very robust and very capable cyber offensive operators, and they do conduct offensive cyber operations all the time. So if they did decide to come after Elon's satellite system, it would have to be something, like they said, a combination of a soft and a hard means, or an electronic and a kinetic means to disable them. But given all the innovation of Starlink and SpaceX, I rest assured that he's done it once when the Russians tried to do some hacking and disabling of his satellites. I'm pretty confident that he's got some stuff up his sleeves that's going to keep that from happening. So we talked about how these regimes don't like the information getting in and out of their country, but that's just one part of it. You would have to believe that the U.S. government is working with SpaceX to use their satellites as a form of communications. And when any of my brothers and sisters that have been into the war zones, satellite phones work great, but they have their limitations to them. You either got delays or it's voice traffic only. And so you're really relying on people on the other end to give you the intel. And if you do have a BGAN satellite system out in the field with you, then it's usually kind of slow or can be slow. But with Starlink and these constellation completely encircling the Earth, I see this as a game changer for the warfighter, where they could use the Starlink system along with the government encryption that they have to actually get high-speed data right into the palm of the hands, even while our trucks and tanks are driving. And that's really got to scare these various governments, because it's one thing to have, voice comms going back and forth, but when you can take and stream in real time what's happening on the battlefield, and then having real time intelligence and telemetry coming in on such a fast link, that's got to be a game changer for the warfighter. Moving forward, Elon's talking about releasing a phone, the Tesla Model Pi, which I think's awesome because we all know, all of us math folks, pi is 3.14. So this is the Tesla phone 3.14, or the Tesla phone Pi. Now, with that, this is going to be a consumer grade phone that could utilize a Starlink system for connectivity when cell towers aren't around. Now, if they're going to put that into the hands of a normal citizen right there, I mean, when we would see in the Gulf War in Afghanistan, our news reporters are out there, the pictures would be grainy, or they wouldn't necessarily be the live shots. They would take and film and then have to spend hours trying to upload on very slow links. But now you could essentially pull out your phone and stream that data. Well, if the civilians can do that, you got to imagine there's probably something in the works where the U.S. government could utilize that technology. But then you're going to say, well, wait a second. If the U.S. government can do it, why couldn't the other governments do that? Well, that's why we're glad that Elon is a U.S. citizen, and he's probably going to take our side in this. And so he could shut down, those other government phones, or they probably just wouldn't use Starlink because they know that it is a U.S. based company and would probably give preferential treatment in times of war to the U.S. government. So you put all that together and you can see where this is a real threat to these oppressive regimes. They're going to have to figure out a new way to keep information out of their country or to control the information going into their country. And with that, we are at the bottom of the hour. I really appreciate everybody riding along as we cruise the highways and byways of not just cyberspace, but of outer space too. This podcast was done completely inside of my radio room, of which its only path of communication is via Starlink. Wow, I never thought the day would come. I remember when I first saw the advertisements for Starlink, I signed up quickly and I got on their waiting list, and man, did I wait and wait and wait. I think it was almost 2 years, but that day has come, and I can tell you the Starlink is here to stay, and I look forward to using it for many years. And us Floridians are no strangers to natural disasters. So when hurricane season gets in full swing, it will be interesting to see how much we rely on Starlink and how it performs. And I will make sure to give everybody an update. With that, I want to say thank you very much for tuning in. I will see you here next week. As always, please send your comments, suggestions, or gripes or complaints to globalbobshow@gmail.com or post on the Facebook group Global Bob Show. All right, until next time.